Hello, everybody. This month, we've been exploring self-judgment and what it means to meet ourselves with more awareness and compassion. So in today's conversation, we gently explore what becomes possible as we begin to relate to ourselves with less judgment and more acceptance. Today, we have Steve Borlos and Bimala Sara. So I'm going to introduce them, and then we'll leave you with them. So Steve Borlogs is a psychological counselor and compassion inquiry training facilitator. He believes in helping people to heal through self-compassion, reconnection with our bodies in order to create an authentic relationship with ourselves. Bimala Sara, Valerie Mason John, is a founding facilitator of Compassion Inquiry, author of 11 books, and was named one of the premier healers of our times in 2024 by Professor Ken Hardy. So thank you so much for taking this invitation, and I'll lead you to discuss about self-judgment and acceptance.
Thank you, Carolina. And it's really great, Steve, for us to be having this conversation about self-judgment, because you can never say too much about this thing of self-judgment, or what we sometimes call the inner critic. So I just really wanted to start with, Steve, this self-judgment, where does it come from? Like, whose voice is it in our heads? Because sometimes we hear people talking about the committee in their head. But Steve, where would you say that, what's the root of this inner critic, this self-judgment?
Wow, that's a deep question, Vimla Sara. On one hand, the first things that come to my mind is like, fuck you, dad. It's like all the time I've heard him not maybe saying directly, but expressing in a way that, oh, our kids, they're not good at school. They won't really succeed in academics. So the kind of internalized voice is going to be, therefore I'm stupid. And then I'm like growing up, thinking I'm defective, and maybe like developing some coping mechanism, to kind of counter that belief. That's really when it cuts deep, right? And then there is the other voice that life, life struggle, bump into difficulties, and then there is a narrative. And if that narrative keep going on, if nobody helped me to make sense of what I'm going through, I may internalize that. So I can be my own, creator of self-judgment for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just bringing to mind what Gabor says often when something traumatic happens to us and there's nobody to speak to. Yeah. And how damaging that can be. And I like to take that a bit further, because actually when there's nobody to speak to, Steve, who do we start speaking to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Internal voice, right?
Exactly.
We start having conversation with oneself. Usually they're not helpful. We start feeding that part. I would start feeding that part. See, I'm alone. I'll always be alone. Nobody care. And that's tremendously painful if not addressed.
So, I think what's so important about this, I'm thinking of people perhaps who have addictions and just looking at alcoholism. And often when people stop the alcohol, they get in touch with this self-judgment, with this inner critic. And that actually, they go back to the alcohol because the alcohol was the thing that was silencing the voice. So Steve, how do we work with this? So, okay, we can become aware of this inner critic. We begin to realize, okay, this isn't our voice, or this voice was conditioned. However, that's not enough. How do we begin to work with it?
Yeah. I would say, if I take my own experience, yes, the first step was to become aware of the voice. And then it kind of was, I needed to understand, to get intimate with that voice and get to know it. Because ultimately, what I found out is it wanted to help me. It will give me advice. It would give me advice maybe to reach out for something that numb the pain. But the purpose of that part that would give me that advice was to support me and to understand that, oh, it may have had a function back then, but it no longer serves today. It gets in the way of me being connected to myself, being accessing my full potential. That helped tremendously to soften toward the voice. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about the internal family systems approach, where they talk about this self-judgment can be a manager, it can be a firefighter,
Yeah.
it can be a critic. What do you think about that approach of dealing with this inner voice, self-judgment?
Personally, it helped me. The IFS concept helped me to map my inner world, but I personally don't really relate to naming them and categorizing them. I see that more as a bunch of people around the table, and everybody want to say something. And maybe I have a teenager that really think he's got all the cue and he knows what to do. Is it a firefighter? Is it a manager? I don't really mind. I just wanna get to know what do you want? What's the fear? What's the longing? What's the hope? Just talk to me.
Yeah.
And then I can enter in a relationship. And they all have their agenda. And usually there is no bad part, right? They all have their agenda. The little guy as well who say, don't go there, it's dangerous. You remember, we've been bullied back then. Yeah.
Most definitely. I'm laughing. They all have their agenda. I just really wanted to share one of the ways that I really worked with this self-judgment. I call my life sentences. And one of my life sentences was, I hate myself. And,
Wow.
Steve, I can remember when I first became aware of it, my fist would be like this and I'd be saying, I hate myself 10 to a dozen. And seemed to be some pleasure with it. And when I began to work with it, I would try and match it with, oh, I love myself. But I was still hearing this voice, I hate myself. And then, being a Buddhist practitioner, okay, so there's no self to hate, but, so, okay, so there's that. So what am I hating? The voice in my head. And then one day I realized, Steve, that actually when that self-judgment or inner critic arises, it's because I'm experiencing vulnerability. And the vulnerability, it's so excruciating to stay with that it's easier to be with the familiar voice, oh, I hate myself, or some other life sentence, some other self-judgment. And that really allowed me to just settle my system. So in a way, talking about settling our system, it's all fine and dandy to think, okay, we become aware of this inner critic, this self-judgment, but how do we come into acceptance with it? Because this is something we know that many of our clients or people we work with struggle with, this acceptance.
Yeah. When I hear you talking, would you agree that it was an experiential moment? It was not just a cognitive understanding that it can be different, but it was a visceral, like an embodied experience.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And to me, that's how I still believe one can shift. I need to have that experience and have a taste of it in order to embody it and feel it fully, and then want to morph it. And slowly I would get to that acceptance that the old way does work, but that other possibility is something else. It's really giving me way more whatever I was longing for.
I love that you say that it's this embodied experience where, in a way, when it becomes that embodied experience, something shatters. Because, in a way, these self judgments is part of our identity. And in a way, who would we be without the self-judgment, Steve? Who, you know, I still have some, and, you know, I have to ask myself, who would I be without the inner critic? Who would you be, Steve, if you were completely free of your self-judgments and inner critics?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question, right? If I don't think it's so present anymore, but when I have a super ego attack, as Gabo would say, you know, a
Yes.
super ego attack where that voice is, you're so defective. You don't get it, man. How long will it take you to get it? When I have like a super ego attack, is really to recognize it and be quite firm with it. You know, I get it. You're here back. Just go and sit on the bench. Keep quiet. So somehow it's a process, right? And yes, it become a weird thing because I believed it was part of my personality. I was shy. I had a lot of self-doubt. And I thought that's who I am. I'll end up like that, shy, self-doubt. And by just engaging with the work, with people that are capable of bringing me there, closer to truth, and have that sign of, have that taste of victory, have that taste of, that's how it could be.
You know, I
As a
love that,
poet.
yeah, I love that you bring, you know, to mind this attack of the superego. In Buddhism, we call it the attack of Mara. And there's this teaching of several ways to work with distracting thoughts. And one of them is imagine these thoughts that you are wearing a rotting carcass around your neck. And in a way, it is like that sometimes, that it's so smelly, this stinking thinking, yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And then
wanted to say, sorry,
yeah,
yeah,
go, no,
please.
carry on, carry
No,
on,
I, I,
yeah,
I thought I heard that back then when I was in the rooms, you know, the
yeah,
12 steps. I heard, you know, she'd smell really bad,
yeah,
but it's so comfy.
yeah,
It's the same. You're so used to that smelly things around the neck that, no, it's all good until we did that.
you know, sometimes we just have to crush it. I'll give you an example. It was my 50th birthday, and it was on the day that I'd be at the Buddhist center, so I wanted people to be there. And so when I got there, there was one person who wasn't there. And Steve, I had to do this ritual, which is done in call and response. And yet I begin this ritual in call and response, and my mind and it's going to this person who isn't there, and I start beating myself up, and it's like in my head I just go, stop. And there was a shattering, a real shattering, because sometimes we do need to crush it, because what was arising is that actually, you know, part of my childhood wounding was abandonment. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so that abandonment really produced or conditioned some of those self-judgments. Yeah. So
yeah,
sometimes, you know, again, when these self-judgments arise, it really is important to become aware of how they've become conditioned. Yeah.
yeah. And that's exactly where why I started by saying, quote unquote, fuck you, dad. It's kind of stop, shatter the voice, get out of that space. I don't need you. I don't want you. And it does need a certain level of, it's another compassion, right? It's like, it's boundary violation. It's not anymore. So yeah, yeah, I like that.
Boundary
That stop.
violation. You know, when you say that, I think, what if we gave ourselves consent? If we were actually to have that conversation with ourselves and say, do we have consent to say this to ourselves? Yeah. To really begin to have that conversation with ourselves, or with the inner part of ourselves, you know, that's so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just aware that there will be people listening to this conversation and might be having this question, well, can you give us some tips? Yeah. Can you give us something to take away?
Yeah.
from this conversation. And what would some of those tips be, Steve?
So first of all, I do believe in the body. So whenever there is tension, there is not only a negative self-talk, there is something with it. Sensation are present. And whenever there is those tension, when I notice them, I just go into the body and move from the story to the body, just to create space and allow some truths to come back before even engaging with the conversation with those parts and being curious about it. And just that can shift a lot, at least in me, making room for being accepting that, yes, I'm triggered. Yes, there is that voice. What can I do first and foremost? Sit with it, breathe through it, notice it in my body, let it be witnessed. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have a practice called Rust. I like working with mnemonics or acronyms, and each letter in English stands for something. So the R stands for just recognizing that we're being activated, recognizing we've been triggered. Yeah. And the U stands for understand that we're caught in a story, often caught in an old story. And the S stands for, sensations or stretch with sensations. So that's somatic, move the body. And the T stands for trust this will pass. And even if it doesn't pass, just tell the voice to relax. Just tell the voice to relax. And I always say, often when we're caught or we have that attack of the super ego, the attack of Mara, we're not going to sit down and meditate. There's just no way. But we can call on one of those letters. Just understand you're just caught in a story. Just recognize you've been activated. We're human. It's okay. We are human. It will happen.
Yeah. And even if one sit for 1 minute, there will be some integration happening. Because would you agree, we so quickly move away from discomfort. And here the invitation is to expand, just make a little bit more room for those, feelings that are.
Yeah. Steve, I'm shaking my head when you just say, would I agree we move away from discomfort? Oh, it resonates. I could just feel it in my body. That's part of my problem, It's like moving away from discomfort, and it can be so automatic pilot. And yet I know when I stay with discomfort, there is freedom. It's bittersweet because it's bitter because we're staying with the discomfort. However, there is freedom when we do. And that's the practice, to do nothing, with the discomfort. However, we end up doing something and we end up calling on those voices. So I think we're almost coming to the end of our time. So I'm going to give you the last final words of wisdom here.
Yeah. It's not mine, but it's from, Michael Brown, that says in his book, The Presence Process, he say, the art of moving from wanting to feel better to getting better at feelings. And to me, that line stuck with me, and even the book is still on my shelf. And I reach out to that book sometimes just to do some presencing, train that muscle that is capable of observing and being with what is.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Really wonderful conversation. Thank you.
It was really nice to have that conversation with you, Imra Sarah. Enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. We finished. It was perfect.